Okay, so I promised you guys I'd get around to updating our gaming benchmarks for the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D, so here we are to do just that. And for good measure, I've also included the 5700X 3D, since that was the most recent version that you could actually purchase. Sadly though, neither chip is currently available, as both have reached the end of their production run, which is why I focused on the 5600X, 5700X, and 5800XT in my previous video, as you can still actually buy those models. But perhaps there is some hope for those of you wishing to upgrade to a part like the 5800X 3D, though admittedly I think it is a very long shot. During the CES trade show, AMD's David McAfee said that they were trying their best to bring back the AM4 ecosystem to satisfy the demands of gamers. So that's exciting, and you know what else is exciting? Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their new Duranaut High Performance Thermal Paste. Duranaut offers extreme long-term stability combined with outstanding thermal conductivity, and this has been achieved through a specially engineered silicon oil combined with aluminium microparticles and zinc oxide nanoparticles of various shapes. Duranaut isn't electrically conductive and won't harden over time. For best performance, you'll want to apply a very thin layer, and to help with this, included is the TG Spatula Pro. The spatula's revised design allows for increased pressure during application, making it easy to spread a thin, even layer of Duranaut. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so it's unclear if AMD is actually going to ramp up AM4 processor production, but if David McAfee is to be believed, it is something they're currently looking at doing. He also made the comment to Tom's Hardware that reintroducing AM4 processors would satisfy the demands of gamers that maybe want that significant upgrade in their AM4 platform without having to rebuild their entire system. The term significant upgrade would at least suggest to me that he's talking about a part like the 5800X 3D, but I guess only time will tell on that one. For now though, you can't really buy the 5800X 3D, at least not at a reasonable price. And on that note, if AMD were to bring it back, there's really no guarantee that pricing would be all that impressive. After all, people are regularly spending $450 US or more on a second-hand version, which is pretty shocking given that the original MSRP was $450 US 4 years ago now. It's made all the more shocking when you consider that the 5800X 3D pricing dropped as low as $270 US in late 2023 and could be regularly purchased for $320 US throughout its life. So today's update isn't really looking at the 5800X 3D or the 5700X 3D as upgrade options or some kind of way to escape high DDR5 pricing, because paying $450 US for a second-hand 5800X 3D doesn't really make sense, given that you can buy a 9600X for $200 US or the 7500F for $150 US, and both should deliver similar gaming performance. Anyway, it's just about time to get into the updated data, but please note I've also updated our Core i5-14600K results. My previous configuration ran into some stability issues, and after diagnosing it and swapping out the motherboard, I found that my DDR5 7200 kit developed some issues, so I've replaced that with a brand new kit, and thankfully there was no kind of degradation issues with my processor. I've also gone and added the Core Ultra 9 285K as another data point, and it really is just simply there as another reference point, along with the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D. A lot of you said on the previous video that you would like those flagship CPUs included as a reference point, so I've gone and done that for you. Okay, let's get in the data. Starting with Rainbow Six Siege, and here we see that the 3D V-cache on these older Zen 3 parts isn't providing a significant performance improvement in this title. The 5800X 3D, for example, it was just 8% faster than the 5800XT when using the medium preset, though that margin did increase to 12% with the Ultra Plus preset. The 5800X 3D did end up coming in 4% slower than the 14600K, though that is a much newer part, as is the 9600X, and in that particular matchup the Zen 3 processor was nearly 20% slower. Next up we have Battlefield 6, and here the 5800X 3D is able to match the 9600X, making it slightly faster than the Core Ultra 5 225F, and 22 to 27% faster than the 5800XT, depending on the quality settings used. Meanwhile, the 5700X 3D was also 4 to 6% slower than the 5800X 3D, which is very typical for that part. Again, the 5800X 3D was only slightly slower than the 14600K, while it trailed the 9800X 3D by a 20% margin. I think that's an impressive result from the old AM4 flagship gaming processor though. Moving on to Arc Raiders. Here we're looking at similar performance for the 5800X3D and 5700X3D when using the medium and epic quality settings. So focusing on the medium data, we see that the 5800X3D was able to match the 9600X, making it almost 20% faster than the 14600K and 24% faster than the 225F. That also made it a massive 47% faster than the 5800 XT. So the 3D V-cache is huge here, and we see that again with the 9800X3D. Finally, it was impressive to see the old 5800X3D coming in just 5% slower than the 285K. The 5800X3D and 5700X3D weren't quite as impressive in Borderlands 4, though performance overall was still excellent, allowing for over 140 FPS in our test. Using the medium preset, the 5800X3D was 20% faster than the 5800XT, while it was 8% slower than the 9600X, 11% slower than the 14600K, and just 13% slower than the 9800X3D, though that part was GPU limited. Marvel Rivals likes memory bandwidth, so the Zen 3 processors are a little more limited here by their DDR4 support. Still, performance is far from weak, with 178 FPS for the 5800X3D using the medium settings and 168 FPS for the 5700X3D. That made the 5800X3D 13% faster than the 225F and just 5% slower than the 9600X. It was also just 6% slower than the 14600K and 8% slower than the 285K. The Zen 3 X3D parts had no issues, with Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered delivering over 180 FPS. The 5700X3D matched the 9600X and 14600K, while the 5800X3D was 5% faster, coming in just behind the 285K. As impressive as the 5800X3D is, the 9800X3D was 36% faster, throughputting an incredible 266 FPS. Then with the very high settings, the margins are similar, though the 5700X3D is now found between the 9600X and 14600K, while the 5800X3D is slightly faster than the Core i5 processor. Moving on to Cyberpunk 2077, here the 5800X3D and 5700X3D performed very well with the medium preset, beating everything with the exception of the 9800X3D, which was significantly faster, boosting performance over the 5800X3D by 31%. However, the 5800X3D was 6% faster than the 9600X, 8% faster than the 285K, and 15% faster than the 14600K. Then with the Ray Tracing Ultra preset, the results shift a little bit, and now the 5800X3D is slightly faster than the 14600K, and then slightly slower than the 285K, but with just a few frames in it, so very similar performance overall. You're looking at 285K-like performance from the 5800X3D and 5700X3D for that matter in Counter-Strike 2. Interestingly, that also meant that the 9600X was 11% faster than the 5800X3D when using the medium preset, but slightly slower when using the very high preset. Still, performance overall was strong, and both Zen 3 X3D parts were considerably faster than the Core i5 14600K. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Space Marine 2 is a very CPU demanding game, so the medium and ultra results are very similar due to the data being primarily CPU limited. The 5800X3D stood up well, matching the 285K with the medium settings, making it just a few frames slower than the 14600K, and therefore almost 30% faster than the 5800XT. The Ultra results are quite similar. The 5800X3D is again 4 to 5 FPS slower than the 285K and 14600K, while the 5700X3D matched the 9600X, so solid performance overall. Performance in The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is also strong, particularly the 1% lows. The average frame rate of both the 5800X3D and 5700X3D is similar to the 9600X, but you're looking at much better 1% lows, up to 20% better in the case of the 5800X3D. Performance overall though is right up there with many modern processors, and with 160 FPS or better using the maximum in-game quality preset, the experience is going to be just as good with the 5800X3D as it would be with the 9800X3D for this particular title. From previous testing, we know that Spider-Man 2 really does benefit from increased system memory bandwidth, so DDR4 is holding back the AM4 processors a little bit here. Performance overall still very good though, and when using the medium settings, the 5800X 3D was 30% faster than the 5800 XT, and therefore right up there with the 9600X. They do slip a bit further behind with the ultimate ray tracing preset, but even so, performance overall was quite good. Mafia the Old Country is another modern game that is memory bandwidth sensitive, so again this does place the AM4 processors at a bit of a disadvantage, as everything else in this graph is leveraging DDR5 memory. Performance overall though was decent, and we're still seeing a good uplift over the 5800 XT. Here the 5800X 3D was 24% faster using the medium preset, though that margin was reduced to 16% with the more GPU limited Epic preset. Now, a game that isn't system memory bandwidth sensitive at all is ACC, but it is cache bandwidth sensitive, so the X3D parts do perform exceptionally well in this title, matching or beating modern processors, with the exception of course of modern X3D parts like the 9800X 3D. Using the medium preset, the 5800X 3D for example was 16% faster than the 14600K and 23% faster than the 285K. Finally, we have Baldur's Gate 3, and this is another game that does benefit from the larger L3 cache of the X3D parts, and we see that here as the 5700X 3D and 5800X 3D perform very well, especially given their age. The 5800X 3D was 23% faster than the 9600X when using the medium settings, and then 18% faster with the Ultra preset, so great performance overall. Okay, so across the 14 games tested, using the medium settings, the 5800X 3D was on average 29% faster than the 5800 XT, so that 3D V-cache is certainly still working a treat in modern games. This allowed it to match, or rather just edge out, the 14600K by a mere 2% margin, while coming in just 1% slower than the 9600X and 2% slower than the 285K, so it's fair to say all four processors did deliver a very similar experience. You could also include the 5700X 3D in that, as it was just 5% slower than the 5800X 3D on average, making it 16% faster than Intel's latest budget processor, the 225F. Finally, when compared to the 9800X 3D, AMD's current generation flagship was on average 35% faster than the 5800X 3D, so a big uplift there, but with the 5800X 3D already very capable, I believe most owners won't feel all that compelled to upgrade. Now, the Ultra preset testing did knock these older Zen 3 processors down a little bit, but overall the results are much the same. The 5800X 3D, for example, again matched the 14600K and 9600X, making it only slightly slower than the 285K. The biggest change can be seen when looking at the 9800X 3D, which is now more GPU limited, reducing the margin over the 5800X 3D from 35%, seen with the medium settings, down to 28%. So, as we've seen over the past few years, the 5800X 3D delivers similar performance to AMD's modern 6-core processors, like the 7600X and 9600X, and this latest update we found that is still very much the case. And this is good news for those of you with a 5800X 3D or even the 5700X 3D, as it means you're still receiving excellent performance that's comparable to that of modern processors. It also means the only real potential upgrade would be to something like a 7800X 3D or of course the 9800X 3D, and given the costs that would be involved there, generally doesn't make sense. Also helping these Zen 3 X3D processors age well was the Windows 11 24H2 update, which I touched on in my previous Zen 3 update video, but we can look at it again here. Now, this isn't an apples to apples comparison, and I never tested the 5800X 3D on 23H2 to compare with 24H2, but we know for a fact that the 24H2 update did boost performance of all Ryzen processors thanks to the Ryzen specific branch prediction optimizations. As some evidence of this though, we can look at the data from my 14th Gen Core series review, which of course did include the Core i5-14600K, and conveniently the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D. This 2-year-old data was actually gathered using Windows 11 21H2, which performed the same as 23H2, and what we see here across the 12 games tested is that the 14600K was on average 9% faster than the 5800X 3D, when using an RTX 4090. Fast forward to today though, and the updated results have the 5800X 3D and 14600K neck and neck, which makes sense given the Windows 11 24H2 update boosted Ryzen performance to the tune of about 10%. confirmed by other media outlets such as Hardware Canucks. And while we're also looking back on older data, one concern some people seem to have with the 5800X3D when it was first released was that it wouldn't actually age all that well, either because it only had 8 cores, or because future games would grow too large for the 64MB 3D V cache to be effective. I'm not sure what the exact theory was there, but I do recall quite a few people claiming that the 3D V cache was only useful in smaller games that could fit within the cache, which seems like an odd claim, but we certainly saw this come up quite a bit. Whatever the exact claim was, the gist of it being that the 3D V cache wasn't as effective as it was being made out to be, and that future games would expose this. So let's have a bit of a look back. Our Ryzen 7 5800X3D review, which was published 4 years ago now, featured 8 games, tested at 1080p using an RTX 3090 Ti, and here the 5800X3D using the same DDR5 3200 memory as the 5800X was 23% faster on average, and that's a solid uplift indeed. Today, using the same memory, the 5800X3D was on average 29% faster than the 5800XT using the medium settings and 24% faster with the ultra settings. So it would seem then that 4 years later, very little has changed with this comparison. And I should note that the 5800XT is just 3% faster than the 5800X on average, so it won't really affect these results too much. So, based on all of that, I think the hype for the 5800X3D was justified, and as we now approach the 4-year mark, I think at this point it has well and truly been validated. Back when we first tested this CPU and compared it with its competition, parts like the Core i9-12900K, which did launch 5 months prior, but the Core i9 required very expensive DDR5 memory, very expensive at the time and very expensive once again, but it required that memory just to match the 5800X3D in a 40-game benchmark, and the processor itself also cost significantly more at $600 US, though to be fair, the Core i9 was a more well-rounded product, let's say, offering much stronger productivity performance. But purely for gaming, I think it's fair to say the 5800X3D has proven to be king, and I think that is a good point to end this video. So, I guess fingers crossed that AMD resurrects this product, but I'm not terribly hopeful they... Well, I hope they will. I'm not confident they will. But anyway, if you like this video, you know what to do. Give it a like, subscribe for more content. I'm not sure how much more AM4 content we'll do, but I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of comments below asking for other processors to be tested, so maybe that's something we can do over the coming weeks, but we do have some other content we want to get on with as well. Yeah, join button, Patreon if you want to become a Hardware Unboxed member. That will give you access to our exclusive Discord server, monthly live streams, behind the scenes content, and Q&A stuff. So check that out if you're interested. If not, that's perfectly fine, and I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.